24/7 TV. President Biden arrived in Israel on Wednesday for a 4-day Middle East visit that will focus on slowing down Iran's nuclear program, getting oil to American gas pumps, and improving relations with Saudi Arabia. As Mr. Biden disembarked from Air Force One, Israeli officials including President Isaac Herzog, Prime Minister Yair Lapid, and former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett were waiting to greet him, alongside the U.S. Ambassador, Thomas R. Nides. Stepping out from the plane, Mr. Biden put on his sunglasses and descended the stairs with one hand on the right balustrade. He fist-bumped a waiting official as Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken followed behind. The national anthems of both countries were then played. In his welcoming speech, Mr. Lapid called Mr. Biden's visit both historic and deeply personal. It is historic because it expresses the unbreakable bond between our countries, Mr. Lapid said, adding. It is also a personal visit because your relationship with Israel has always been personal. You once defined yourself as a Zionist. You said that you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. You were right. And in your case, a great Zionist and one of the best friends Israel has ever known. Mr. Lapid also confirmed that the two leaders would discuss Iran and their joint efforts to enhance cooperation among Middle Eastern countries. Once isolated in the region, Israel is increasingly involved in regional diplomacy. After landmark diplomatic deals with 3 Arab countries in 2020, and officials hope that further progress will be made during Mr. Biden's visit. Even as Mr. Biden was still in the air, the Israeli and American governments had made a flurry of announcements in anticipation of his arrival. The two sides unveiled a high-level U.S.-Israeli initiative on technology and national security. The Israeli government made several small gestures to the Palestinians, and White House officials flying with Mr. Biden to Jerusalem suggested that the president might avoid any handshakes with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia by refraining from all such gestures on the trip because of the coronavirus. The technology initiative, called a strategic dialogue, will focus on fields including artificial intelligence, quantum information science, and solutions to global challenges such as climate change and improving pandemic preparedness. According to a joint announcement, Amos Yadlin, a former head of Israel's military intelligence directorate, told reporters that the move means that the United States recognizes Israel as a science and tech superpower, and that it was important for the United States that Israel will cooperate with it, and not with China. That move comes on a presidential trip that is partly about stemming China's inroads into the Middle East. Last week, Riyadh and Washington quietly signed a memorandum of understanding to cooperate on building an X-generation 5 gigawatt cellular network in Saudi Arabia that is designed to box out Huawei, China's 5 gigawatts champion. The Israeli government also made several small gestures to the Palestinians, including granting some new work permits for Gazans before Mr. Biden's arrival. But there are few expectations that his visit will have a significant effect on Israeli-Palestinian relations. Israelis and Palestinians remain divided about how and whether to return to negotiations, which were last held in 2014. And Palestinians have been disappointed by Mr. Biden's failure to reverse several measures taken by the Trump administration that Palestinians felt were harmful to their hopes of independence. Among the weapons that Israel is displaying for President Biden on Wednesday is a prototype of a new laser defense system that Israeli leaders have described as a strategic game changer for the region. The weapon, known as the Iron Beam, is a result of 2 decades of research and experimentation. And while it may still be a few years away from deployment, officials say the laser will be able to intercept rockets, mortar shells, drones, and anti-tank missiles. Israel has long been a pioneer in air defense, with significant and continued American support. The display of the multi-tiered air defense arsenal put on for Mr. Biden provides an opportunity to present the products of that cooperation and to showcase Israeli military technologies to the world. Iron Beam, which Mr. Biden will view at Ben Gurion Airport, is intended to complement, not replace, Iron Dome and David Sling, Israel's short and medium-range missile interception systems. Wednesday's display will also include the advanced Arrow 3 and a ballistic missile system, which was jointly developed by Israel and the U.S. Missile Defense Agency, one of the first countries to develop a deployable laser weapon. Israel has allocated hundreds of millions of dollars to the project as Israel and some of its Middle Eastern allies, including the United Arab Emirates, increasingly face airborne threats from their shared enemy, Iran, and its proxies. Introducing the laser weapon this spring, Naftali Bennett, then Israel's Prime Minister, hinted at the broader possibilities, saying that it was an asset that Israel could use to gain support, create alliances, and become even stronger. This new generation of Israeli air defense could also serve our friends in the region who are also exposed to severe threats from Iran and its proxies. Mr. Bennett said, Israel is not alone in developing such weapons. At least one laser weapon, Lockheed Martin's Helios, has started deployment on U.S. Navy ships, and the United States Army has been working on more powerful ones able to down cruise missiles. The technology has shifted from the chemical laser, which required corrosive and toxic chemicals to induce a beam, as well as bulky machinery, to the solid-state laser, which requires only copious amounts of electricity. Israeli officials say they are working closely with the United States on laser technology and looking to partner with their main strategic ally. We are sharing knowledge with the Americans, Daniel Gold, the head of the Directorate of Defense Research and Development in Israel's Defense Ministry and a brigadier general in the reserves, said in an interview shortly before Mr. Biden's arrival on Wednesday. We are talking about how to cooperate on the laser program, he said. The U.S. has a very good program. We have very good program, he said, adding that Wednesday's display would be the first exposure of Iron Beam to the top level of American leadership. Israeli defense officials said the laser weapon had performed beyond expectations in a series of live-fire tests in the southern Israeli desert this spring, destroying a rocket, a mortar shell, and a drone in flight. Iron Dome is heavily subsidized by the United States, with each interception costing tens of thousands of dollars. Mr. Biden recently approved an allocation of about $1 billion for the acquirement of additional interceptors. Israeli officials say the main advantage of the Iron Beam will be its cost-effectiveness, with interceptions costing little more than the power needed to operate it. One disadvantage, however, is that ground-based laser beams are ineffective in hazy and cloudy conditions.
President Herzog, Mr. Prime Minister Lapid, it's an honor to once again stand with friends and visit the independent Jewish state of Israel. President Nixon was the first American president to visit Israel in 1974. My first visit was, as you mentioned, as a young United States Senator from Delaware in 1973, just a few weeks before the Yom Kippur War. I had the privilege of spending time with Prime Minister Golda Meir. I'll never forget, I was sitting next to a gentleman on my right when there were aides. His name was Rabin. I look back on it all now, and I realized that I had the great honor of living part of the great history of this great, and I did say, and I say again, you need not be a Jew to be a Zionist. The fact is that since then I've known every single prime minister, and it's been an honor. Formed strong working relations with each of them. And now, this is my 10th visit. Every chance to return to this great country, where the ancient roots of the Jewish people date back to biblical times, is a blessing. Because the connection between the Israeli people and the American people is bone deep. It's bone deep. Generation after generation, that connection grows. We invest in each other. We dream together. We're part of what has always been the objective we both had. I've been part of that as a senator, as a vice president, And quite frankly, before that, having been raised by a righteous Christian, who we had dinner at our table every night before he went back to work. And it was a place where we had conversation and incidentally ate. And I remember he taught us all about what happened in the Holocaust. Why weren't the tracks bombed? Why did we not? Why? And he imbued in us a sense of obligation that we all have. And now as president, I'm proud to say that our relationship with the State of Israel is deeper and stronger, in my view, than it's ever been. And with this visit, we're strengthening our connections even further. We have reaffirmed the unshakable commitment of the United States to Israel's security, including partnering with Israel on the most cutting-edge defense systems in the world. From here, I'm going straight to a briefing on Israeli missiles and rocket defense capabilities, including the U.S. support for the Iron Dome and Israel's new laser-enabled system called the Iron Beam. We're going to deepen our connections in science and innovation and work to address global challenges through the new strategic high-level dialogue on technology. We'll continue to advance Israel's integration into the region, expand emerging forums and engagement like the new I2U2 Summit, which will bring Israel, the United States, the UAE together, and India as well, to deepen our economic cooperation between the Middle East and the Indo-Pacific. Greater peace, greater stability, greater connection. It's critical, if I might add, for all the people of the region, which is why we'll discuss my continued support, even though I know it's not in the near term, a two-state solution. That remains, in my view, the best way to ensure the future of equal measure of freedom, prosperity, and democracy for Israelis and Palestinians alike. We're going to celebrate the ending of people-to-people connection and the enduring connection that binds our nations together, commemorate the history that we must never allow to repeat itself. Later today, I will once more return to the hallowed ground of Yad Vashem to honor 6 million Jewish lives who were stolen in the genocide and continue, which we must do every day, continue to bear witness. To keep alive the truth and honor of the Holocaust, horror of the Holocaust, honor those we lost so that we never, ever forget that lesson. And to continue our shared, unending work to fight the poison of anti-Semitism wherever it rises its ugly head. Wherever we find it in the world, we make real on the promise of never again by taking it on. We have a full agenda over the next 2 days because the relationship between Israel and the United States covers every issue that matters to our mutual futures. We're united in our shared values and our shared vision. I'm looking forward to our time together over the next few days. May Israel and the United States continue to grow and prosper together for the benefit of the entire world. And I mean that, for the benefit of the entire world. Thank you, and God bless you all.
משמר יעבור לדום משמר. תום.